Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. We're continuing our work in Jeremiah chapter 6. We saw in the two previous verses, verses 4 and 5, that the Babylonians were on their way, at least in Jeremiah's vision. He was calling them to come on their way, and the Babylonians were speaking, saying, we're ready to attack the city, even if we have to do it by night, as they accomplish the Lord's corrective punishment against his city. Here, the Lord is, in verse 6, the Lord himself is going to take up his word again and speak directly. Actually, he's going to be speaking to the Babylonians about what he expects them to do. And let's listen to the text as we read through it in Hebrew. Ki ko amar Adonai Tzavaot, ki litu etza, v'shifichu al Yerushalayim solela. Hi ha'ir hofkad, kula oshek bakirba. Not too complicated, although we got one or two little problems. Let's go ahead and take a look. Because, or for, thus has said Yahweh, thus says the Lord. There's our typical, the Lord of hosts, actually. So this is our typical introduction to the prophetic formula here. This is what God's going to say. We can open the quotes right over here if we wish. Kirtu. So what do we have here? This is just an imperative, a straight-out imperative. It's going to be a 2MP. It's a kal from the verb karat, which means to cut. So here it's cut, or in the context of eitz, cut down. So cut down etza. Now etza, you probably know the word eitz, usually written like this, which means tree. But etza, if we take it in the form as we have it here, it would be a hapax. This would be the only time we'd actually find this form here. And it's possible that this is a collective noun for trees, because eitz by itself can also be a collective noun. It can be one tree, or trees in general, the woods, we might say. So this might be just another synonym, one-time use of this word. Or actually this here could actually be a suffix. This could be a 3fs suffix. Now usually if it's a 3fs suffix, you're going to see a mapik here, like this, a little dagish that's going to be right there. And we don't see that here. So there's some that think that this is the hapax, but others that think that actually this is a suffix, even though it doesn't have the mapik. There's a few places where we don't have the mapik. It's not a dagish, but we don't have that little dot right there as the suffix. So it could still be either way. It's very clearly her trees, the trees that surround the city of Jerusalem. So there's no misunderstanding. It's either the trees, or trees in general, or her trees. So cut down the trees. Well, why are you going to do that? Because you're starting to build a siege against the city, and you're going to continue that here. And then once here, we have another imperative, just like the other one up here. It's an imperative 2MP. It's a kal as well, from the verb shafak. Shafak, like this, with a final kaf at the end. And shafak means to pour out. It's usually used with water or sometimes with blood. Here it's pouring out over Jerusalem, over the city. And what is it you're pouring out? Solela. Well, what is solela? Solela is actually a mound, like a mound of dirt. So you can picture this image of pouring out mounds of dirt as the Babylonians are building a siege mound against the city. As you know, if you're laying siege to a walled city, you have to begin piling up dirt against it to build sort of a rampway up to be able to attack the walls and get over the walls at the top. So it's a siege mound. So they're pouring out against Jerusalem a siege mound. And then this is a feminine. There's your personal pronoun, your 3fs pronoun. This is the city. So in this form that we have here, this attributive form here, we would say, in a predicate nominative, we would say, this is the city, not this city, but this is the city. There's your article there for city. Now, this is the word that is giving us some trouble here, because as it's written here, it's hofkad. This is actually a perfect. If we take it by the form, it's a perfect. It's a 3ms, and it's a hofal from the verb pakad. There's your root right there. This is this sort of polyvalent verb that's used in all sorts of different ways. The basic meaning to be visited, or to visit, or in the Hofal would be to be visited. But it can have the sense of numbering, to take into account. It can have the sense of actually punishing. And that might be the best way to take it here. So if we take it as a perfect 3ms, it would be it was punished with the Hofal on it. Now, the problem is this is a 3ms, and the city is obviously feminine. You got a feminine pronoun here, and city is feminine. So does this really fit with, is it this is the city, it was punished? We almost need to supply some sort of an understood relative pronoun. The city who or that is punished, but then we still have this unusual case here where the verb in the masculine doesn't agree with the subject in the feminine, but sometimes the masculine will just dominate over the feminine and sort of absorb it, especially in conjugations which are not extremely common. There's only a couple usages of the Hofal in this verb, so it wouldn't be totally anomalous for a feminine subject to be picked up by the masculine form of the verb here. Now, the Septuagint read not this verb at all, but read hasheker, which is the lie. So some of the translations will actually pick that up, which is one of Jeremiah's favorite words. This is the city of the lie. The problem is there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever for this in the Hebrew manuscripts. But the Septuagint and the Greek translation did use that because they probably had a hard time figuring out what this is as well. There's a good discussion on this in the Net Bible, the note that's on this verse in the Net Bible, the Internet Bible. But let's leave it as a Hofal, and we'll supply it as sort of an understood impersonal here. This is the city that is to be punished. And then the last phrase that we have in the verse, all of her, is kol with a 3fs suffix. There you can see the mapik, which we were expecting up here, but we didn't see. All of her oshek, and this is a noun meaning oppression or extortion, and then in her, and then kerev, usually with two segols underneath it, in her midst. So entirely oppression in her midst. In other words, there's nothing but oppression in the midst of the city, which is why God is sending his judgment. Okay, a little complicated right there, but not too bad. Let's go ahead and hide our work here. Squeeze our text down. We're going to do this like that so we can get a little bit of room. And let's look at a couple translations. First of all, in the Old King James. For thus hath the Lord of hosts said, hew ye down trees. Okay, cut down trees, meaning her trees. They don't use this as a personal suffix here, her trees, but that's okay. Like I said, it could just be a hapax in that particular form. And cast a mount. We would use a word mound now, but a mount against Jerusalem. This is, see in italics, to be supplied, the city to be visited. They left this pakad as this very generic sort of a sense. They have it in the passive sense, like the Hofal, but they have to kind of put it together like that. This is the city to be visited. She is holy oppression in the midst of her, all of her oppression in her midst. So they had to kind of bring that phrase out like that. New American Standard, sort of similar, but you'll see a little bit of difference. For thus says the Lord of hosts, cut down her trees. So they took this probably as a suffix, which I think it might well be. And cast up a siege against Jerusalem. Cast up a mound. Well, the mound is actually a siege mound, so this is part of the siege works, as well as the trees are part of the siege work as well. This is the city to be punished. So they have the same form up here, and this is probably the best way to deal with this phrase here, to be punished. So they've specified it a little bit more. In whose midst there is only oppression. And then finally, in the NIV, they kind of tried to smooth it out a little bit. This is what the Lord Almighty says: cut down the trees and build siege ramps, because they're using both the wood and the dirt here. Pour out the ramps, the mounts, the mounds against Jerusalem. This city must be punished. So rather than taking this as this is the city to be punished, they've made it this city, which is not exactly the grammatical structure you have here, but as you try and smooth it out, you end up with something like this. This city must be punished. It is filled with oppression. So a little bit of a paraphrase to smooth it out here, but I think they're going in the right direction. I think that's the right idea of what's happening here. We notice as we work through this verse that the Lord knows exactly what's going on. When he does send his punishment, his correction, it's because it's carefully measured. He knows what's going on in the city, and he is sending his punishment in the proper proportions to deal with it. He is truly a just God, even if he is severe with his people at times. Well, check back with us soon as we continue working through Jeremiah chapter 6 in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.